Welcome to the Running on Grass podcast. As always, I'm your host, Logan Pripino, with my co-host, Eamon O'Toole. How are we doing today, Eamon?
Doing great. How are you, Logan?
Excellent.
How the grasslands in Imperial, Nebraska looking today?
You know, it looks wonderful, which is very surprising given how dry everything is. And I've been talking to a lot of my grain farming friends who are feeling droughted out, expensed out, and low revenued out. And I tell them it's been wonderful to go out and on the range and just see how resilient it's been. You know, because we had good rains into October. The grass went dormant, got great crowns, and we've got cool season grasses that are probably like 5 or 6 inches tall, which is very unusual for us in April. So we're sitting pretty. How are things looking in Wyoming?
Yeah, this April, we've had almost an inch of rain, and it is amazing how different it looks. Just a little bit of rain here changed out our entire winter. We didn't hardly have anything, and this has just greened up the whole country, and everybody's starting to feel good. We're still cold, though. It feels like April. The whole winter hasn't felt like winter, but now it's starting to feel like April. We've had a few 4 to 8 inch snows and sleet, rain, all those things. So countries looks good. We don't have anything but cool season grasses here because our lowest place is 6,300 out in the desert, and then our main place is 7,000. And as I was telling you the other day, our grass in the mountains is better than I've seen it a month from now. So we're definitely ahead of the game.
Well, what do you want to talk about today?
Let's get into some beef demand and talk about where things have gone and how wild the ride's been.
Yeah. And then let's also hit on the super El Nino forecast, see if we both believe that that's going to happen or not. And then I do want to hit a bit on, like I hit on earlier, with just the farming vibe right now and everything that's going on. I just want to touch on that because it seems like a perfect storm of negativity on the grain production side. So let's kick it off with beef demand. What are you seeing?
There's been some things kicked out talking about how the S&P's been outperformed by beef demand in the last 5 years, and I
saw that chart.
That's amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah. And I think it's from the 2020 lows, and live cattle are up 100%, feeder cattle are up 160%, and the S&P is up like 70%. What do you think about that?
I would say 5 years ago would have been a good time to get into the cattle business.
Good for us, huh?
I don't know what everybody was thinking. Why wouldn't you have bought a whole bunch of cows 5 years ago?
Yeah. It seemed, if you remember the mood in the cattle industry in 2021, it seemed like we were never going to have another good day again. I mean, it was super negative because the packing plants were backing up. I mean, it was just a brutal time to be in the cattle industry.
Yeah, that's why I say 5 years ago, why wouldn't you have jumped into this game? This is really fun, right? And then here we are enjoying the fruits of our labors 5 years later. But it has been an interesting thing. I remember I bought some cows in 2023, which was during an awful winter, and it was kind of tough to get them through that last part of the winter when I purchased them and get them calved out. And then to see that those cows that I bought for like $1,200 as short-term cows, and some of them I still have because why not? Their calf is paying for themselves 2-fold, 3-fold now every cycle. So every year that those cows stay alive and can keep giving me a calf, why not? And then that cow as a cull cow is worth at least double what I paid for her with a calf inside of her. So it's just been a wild ride.
Yeah, I bought a pile of heifer calves that year for $700 to $800 as ballers. A lot of them were Gap 4 naturals for like $800. I bought a set off a ranch, and they negotiated very well, and then they missed their weight stop by like 60 pounds. Sold them as bred cows here 2 years ago, not this last year, but 2 years ago. So I've been enjoying the run up. And I think and I was reading about it in the Stockman Grass Farmer, Joe Salatin was talking about how the beef demand has just been off the rails. And what he brought up was very interesting. He said, I don't think most beef producers understand how important it is to have beef at the base of the food pyramid. As beef producers, we're like, oh yeah, beef is a superfood. I've known that. You remember growing up in the 90s and early 2000s, like going to college, and like they were like just beef was bad. Like my university, UCSB, shout out, they tried to do meatless Mondays, but they they didn't want to go all in, so they did beefless Mondays. Like that's a world that I lived in, and it's amazing that we have just come past that as a culture.
Well, I'm going to give a shout out to the University of Wyoming. We never said that.
I know. Pissed me off. I will not give money to UCSB unless they do beef only Mondays, and then I would consider
There you go.
donating if they make up for all the lost demand when I was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, going to University of Wyoming, everybody, half your friends or most of them either are in the beef industry or are friends with the beef industry and certainly wouldn't speak out against it in Wyoming. So it was very, very different feel than California, but I can't even, that's wild that you would go, that we read about it, but we didn't see it in Wyoming.
Oh, I did. I got invited to, and there were no farmers and ranchers there, just 0.0%.
Logan Pribino was one of one.
I was one of one. There'd be the documentaries like Super Size Me and Forks Over Knives was one of them. And they're just like, it's just movies about how terrible beef is for you. And you had to bite your tongue because you're like, I eat beef every day. Everyone I know that eats beef every day is pretty thin. All y'all don't look that good. Like the proof is in the pudding. So it is nice to have beef just prominently featured in that food pyramid. And shout out to RFK for getting it done. He went and spoke at CattleCon. If I remember right, you stayed out till about 3 a.m. and didn't quite make that session. I was there.
It was time for a nap. Unfortunately, I was running a little low and slow at that point, but I had made many friends and future
networking
opportunities were done the evening before. But everybody that went told me it was just fantastic and that I missed out. So
yeah,
I'm so glad RFK did come, and he really, talked about that food pyramid and how it is going to totally change how the world and the U.S. especially see how we need to eat more beef. And I think that that's going to, just keep the rise going for us. And then it's very interesting. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were talking about Ozempic and how the Ozempic GLP-1 drug and then beef being at the food pyramid, it's just like a perfect combination of both for the beef industry.
Yeah, that was Levi Jordan.
Yeah, Levi Jordan talked about it.
He said your preference for what you crave shifts to protein. He's like, I used to be able to just crush a bag of Doritos, and now I don't even crave it, but I do crave a good ribeye, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so perfect for the industry right now and beef demand. And then, as we were talking about before, it's outperforming the S&P 500, which is where we're all trying to put as much money as we can, right? We're all like, oh, we got to invest. Someday I'm hoping to retire. And all I should have done was buy cows.
That's true. But I will say, I throw back to 2021 when we as producers were quick to tell people we are not in the beef industry. We are in the cattle industry, and they are separated. Not currently. The leverage is clearly in the cow-calf sector, but I imagine that is not going to be true forever.
And a lot of that came off of all the shift in the ag industry, because there were a lot of producers, including, neighbors of mine. And then also, I wouldn't say that I got big into it. I do a few beef a year for family, friends, things like that. But I know people that switched a lot of their operation. Instead of selling as many calves, they went ahead and took 20, 30, 50 calves out of their herds. And for some people, that's their whole herd. And for other people, that's a quarter or 20% or whatever that looks like. But they took a bunch of those cattle and put them in a feed yard, grew them out, and then got into the direct-to-consumer industry, and which worked great right then during post-COVID.
Because they were the packer was capturing $1,000 at that time profit. So if you could sell direct-to-consumer, you were getting that $1,000. Today, what is it?
Negative. Personally won't let one go today for less than probably 5,000, 5,500 a head as a live animal, because that's where that margin is, and that's what the packer's making. And starting it as a calf to get it to where it is today, that's where I have to be to make the numbers work. But I wouldn't do it for less than that because I've got so much time and feed into those animals.
Yeah, I saw this was a tweet I was shared with you earlier, but someone said, I heard an interesting line, and you can argue with the amounts, but there's $1,100 of margin between the cow calf guy and the packer. And the cow calf man is getting 1,600 of that. So the packer is subsidizing us right now. And I don't think that they're going to want to be subsidizing us like that at that level for long. But they did get to enjoy a $1,000 profit on an animal that they owned for a week
Yeah. Yeah.
back
Where
in the day.
I'm still, if you look at what a 500-pound calf is, 3,000-ish dollars right now, if you're going to forward contract that calf. So that $500 calf is worth $3,000. Well, these steers that I've been feeding, I've had them for quite some time now, and like over a year and really 2 years. And so, yeah, right around 2 years. So by the time I'm done with them, I've got 700 days, whatever, into them, where that packer had them for 7.
Yeah. Shout out to Randy Block too, Cattle Facts. You and I always go to the Cattle Facts deal in Denver every December, and even in 2021, Randy Block he'd bring up that demand deal, and he's like, "This thing it's going up, guys, and we're not capturing it right now as the cattle industry, but we're going to, and we're going to soon. That demand thing is just a runaway train going up and to the right."
Yeah, he nailed it on the head. This winter, I thought it was interesting to hear him in Denver in December, and they do their 1 day conference, and it was, that's where I think I'll speak for both of us. I make my decisions on what I'm going to purchase that next summer. What am I going to buy in January, February, March after I go to his meeting in December, and make my plans based off of what I'm seeing on the demand side there. And I think that's why I've stuck to this bred heifer thing, and I think that's why you are too. But it's Randy was very good about saying, "Hey guys, remember interest is 8%. Don't get crazy here. Like, yeah, good times are still to come, but don't get wild." And then they shifted, I thought, a little bit in
Yes.
February and said, "Hey, this thing is going to continue to be good." I didn't think that they said go borrow all the 8% money you can, but they definitely said feel confident and go do well for yourself.
Yeah, when we were there in December, we talked a lot about how they had to give that presentation the Tuesday after the Lexington plant closing was announced on Friday. So they had to go in and edit. That changed a little bit. It turns out not a lot in retrospect, looking back. But at the time, it was thought to be a major shift, and we thought that had affected their overall moods. And I think by February, it was kind of apparent that closing down Lexington was not going to be a major market event.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And then we had the sustainable plant open up like right behind the closing, which didn't change the kill numbers. I will just use the word significantly. And so that really helped that Lexington plant take a softer blow, I think, than had it not.
Yeah, it helped them scale up. A lot of the workers at Lexington ended up at Sustainable, so it was for Sustainable. It was a good.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's talk about the Mexican border for a minute.
Let's hear what. Oh yeah, what is the latest news on that?
Sounds like there's been some screwworm detected in northern Mexico, but those guys are scaling up big time to feed their own cattle, is everything I'm seeing. And it sounds like that's going to be a lot less cattle coming into the United States over time, which changes 1.5 million head.
Yeah, it'd probably be more beef imports from Mexico. It was one of the newsletters I read. It's fundamentally changing they're building feeding capacity in Mexico, and instead of importing feeder cattle, we can expect just more imports from Mexico in the beef case.
Yeah, yep. The live animal is going to stay down there, and they're going to be sending us lean.
Yeah, I would not want to be a large owner of a South Texas feed yard at the moment.
Yeah, and what do those ranchers down there do that are the ones who historically have been taking those cattle in? How do they shift or pivot on this?
I don't know if it's a lot of the. I think that a lot of those end up going right to the feed yard in bundled deals. Is what I've had a conversation with someone that was trying to explain to me that when you buy Mexican cattle, it's not by the potload; it's significant volume, which only larger feed yards can handle.
Interesting. Yeah, I'd love to hear from some people along the way. Maybe they can hit you up on Twitter, hit me up on Facebook, Instagram, and talk to us about what they're seeing, or if they are ranchers. I'd love to get that perspective and hear what's going on the cattle rancher side of this down on in the South.
Yeah, and questions too. Send them our way. We're over 200 views on week 2. So if you have anything you want us to discuss, hit us up. Find us on socials. Let us know what we should be talking about. Or like Eamon said, if you're affected by the closing of the border, we'd also like to hear from you. Are any ranchers running Mexican cattle, or is it all feed yards? We'd love to know.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let's visit a little bit about the El Nino and what you're expecting in Southwest Nebraska from this.
Well, we are droughty. We are D3 in Southwest Nebraska right now. We had what was an amazing winter, and as it shifted into spring, became not so amazing. So we are definitely in a dry pattern. We had the driest winter of my dad's life, if not beyond that from his perspective. But we are praying for a significant change in the weather.
Yeah, yeah, same. We're, like I said, we've gotten an inch here in April, and we hope that the train keeps coming. It looks like I live in one of those places that's always equal chances. And that is always concerning to me, especially when I go to Cattle Facts. I'm like, oh, what are they going to tell me about the weather? And I live right on the place where the northern Rockies and the southern Rockies come together, and it's always equal chances. My grandfather said in the 30s, when things were so bad everywhere, this valley where I live was still okay. And I guess, we're still okay today. And I'm like 1 year away from deciding what I'm going to do in terms of running less livestock, or is it going to stay normal and I can keep doing what I'm doing? So we'll see what happens there.
And a little tidbit there. The 30s were not terrible in Southwest Nebraska from a precipitation standpoint. As the 5th generation, I have the esteemed pleasure of operating this ranch at its lowest rainfall year, which was 2022. No other year was that dry.
I could not tell you if 2022 was our worst. It's been the worst in my lifetime. It was definitely tough then. 2002, I believe, might have been worse than this. Everybody talks about 1977 here and how tough it was. And then the winter 78, 79 was a monster. So I don't know if this is like the slow build up to the monster winter coming in a year or two. So we'll see what that looks like.
Well, let's talk about that super El Nino, because NOAA has recently come out and said they are pushing the super El Nino to come to later in the summer now versus earlier. So it might hit us to where we would have a bad winter.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I was reading 77% of the United States is abnormally dry and 56% is in drought. So in a country as large as ours, for over half of it to be in drought. And I've talked to my friends in Florida, and they're like, this is insane. We are really in tough shape. And they're used to being able to run like, a cow to an acre, where that's just not even in my purview. Um, they're saying that April, the thing I was reading says April, May may not be an indicator of what the rest of the summer is going to look like, but maybe it's going to kick off more in August, right?
Yeah. Although Brian Bledsoe on Twitter, and I follow Brian, a big fan of his. He's grew up on a family ranch by Ray. He kind of specializes in the high plains weather systems. And he says, watch out for May. He's showing that there's going to be a strong El Nino. And he says that May is historically a key pivot month. So I hope he's right. And that, it starts raining on May 5th, let's just say. And I have trouble getting my corn crop in the ground because it's so wet.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's visit about that a little bit. Corn isn't worth a whole lot of money and isn't expected to be worth a whole bunch of money this year. Yet people are continuing. The plan is that Cattlefax talks about is we're looking at another record corn crop.
That they backed down from that a little bit. The soybean acres are up, but they early on they were talking about 100 million acres of corn. Corn right now is worth less than a gallon of gas, which um, I don't know. I am pretty bullish grains. It is so low. If it goes any lower, it's going to start breaking people. And I just can't help but think that there is price relief. It's just hard red winter wheat. Jared McDaniel on Twitter, he said 60 pounds of hard red winter wheat is worth less than a pop and a candy bar. That just doesn't quite sound right, does it?
I'm just shaking my head here. I can't, for the cost of equipment, the cost of fertilizer, the cost of employees, all the pieces. We cannot expect that we can break farmers or ranchers or anyone in agriculture really, and that we're going to continue to have a sustainable country by living off of other countries and imports. That's my big picture worry that I'll throw out there, but it makes sense that you would switch over to soybeans right now because of the increased cost of these fertilizer prices.
Yeah, but soybeans are a big variable because we export like half of our soybeans to China. And with Donald Trump as president, you know how they like to play games. It's risky. Corn is utilized locally with feeding and ethanol, and soybeans, it's all export market. And it's just, it can be brutal, the highs and the lows in that market.
Yeah. You know so much more about because you're so much closer to the farming world than I am. I live out here in the
Well, I am a farmer, Eamon. We produce and sell grain. Compared to the cattle market the last several years, I've clearly been a hobby farmer. My ranch employees have been like, what are you doing crawling up in that planter? We've got several $1 million of a calf crop out there, and you're planting $4 corn. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, when I came out and visited you last fall and to see the heifers that I'd summered for you and to see that they went from the best pasture in the Mountain West in terms of hay meadow ground, and that's what they lived on and that's what they were bred on. And then they go to your place where explain to me what you had planted in there because I have never seen feed that was easily 8 to 10 feet tall and thick as like rainforest that you can't walk through.
Yeah, I love to talk about that heifer group because they were on feed. We kicked them to wheat pasture. Then we kicked them onto our ranch, which we had good grass. Those heifers never had a bad day in their lives. And then even the corn stalk fields that we grazed, there was like 20 bushel of corn on the ground. Like they seriously did not have a bad day. And that doesn't always happen at the Wine Glass Ranch. I'm not sure about the latter, but every once in a while we have a little bit of adversity, but by God, not that group. But what we were growing was what we call our C4 mix, which is a warm season mix of sorghum sudan, millets, BMRs. We throw some radish and turnips in there as well. But yeah, it grows. If it rains a lot like it did last summer, it'll grow about 16 feet. And those heifers, they love it. Cattle are not plains animals, and anyone who has ever tried to get cattle out of like a cedar tree row or brush country knows that, because once that cow goes into the brush, you're not getting her out. So when we grow that cover crop, they revert back to like something just clicks with them, and they love to live in that dense cover, and it just something clicks in them, and they do a lot better when they're in cover like that.
Yeah, what's a BMR?
Brown midrib is a trait that you can add to a plant that is just less lignin in it, so it's just more digestible to the animal.
Gotcha. Yeah, when I went out to Logan's place to look at these, you couldn't see them first. You said, "Yeah, all those heifers are in there," and I said, "In where?" And I'm looking at it like a cornfield. You just can't see past the first row. And he's like, "No, they're in there." And then all of a sudden, one walks out to the end of the electric fence right there, and I'm like, "Oh yeah." And he was telling me how you have to plan the days of how long they're going to be in there if you need them to work them or ship them or whatever you're going to do with them. Because once you turn them in there, there's no coming out. They literally have to eat their way through it and eat their way to seeing them and finding them.
That's true.
I've never seen anything like it. It was incredible.
Yeah, I love growing that crop. It's cheap to do. I pay my landowners cash rent for that, and all in costs, I'm sub $100 an acre on that, and don't make a whole lot on the like the farming side of it because I've got the farm and the cattle side. The cattle side rents it from the farm side, but it allows us to have a lot more cattle, and it allows us to have a really rich feed source later in the summer when our pastures are kind of burnt out. So that's been one of my favorite crops to grow, hands down.
Yeah, and how long, let's say you have that group was 800 head or something like that.
Yeah,
So
800.
let's say you have 800 head. How many acres did you give those 800 head, and how long did that last them?
So we will give them about 10 acres a pop, and I don't know exactly what it comes down to, but the term that we use is animal unit days. So 1,000, or like let's just say steer days. Let's just say a 995-pound steer. What he needs for one day, I will get about 100 steer days an acre out of that C4 mix year in, year out.
Wow, it's
So
that's
let's so if he's gaining like 2 or 3 pounds per head per day, which is not uncommon, we're harvesting about 300 pounds of cattle per acre.
300 pounds of feed per head per acre.
Cattle, not feed, cattle.
Okay,
Beef pounds, basically 300
pounds.
pounds of
Gotcha.
beef per acre.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. If anybody ever gets a chance to go out to Logan's in the fall and see this feed, it is just something I didn't even know you could do something like that because I live in a place where we only grow cool season grasses. Or we can do some triticale here that grows pretty nicely, but that's the only thing I found that grows at 7,000 feet and does really high volume. So, and we talked about that a little bit before, is what's the dollar amount if you're taking in cattle on a per head per day basis, and then you've got to put in that seed, is the juice worth the squeeze on that to do that?
Yeah, it is because it's cheap, and I use $1.50. So to my farming enterprise, I give $1.50 per head per day, and the ranch side is making good money on it as well if they're doing 2 or 3 pounds per head per day. But yeah, it works. It works really well especially when you're comparing it to corn, soybeans, or any of those markets right now. And we don't own a combine. We're all custom harvest. A cow do the harvesting for me. We always have too many animals at Wineglass sitting around. So whenever I can utilize their labor versus my custom harvesters from South Dakota, I'm way money ahead to just eliminate the middleman.
Yeah, I'll do you one better. I don't even have a planter. I don't have a planter. I don't have a rake, a disc. We do have a harrow that we use. We have a little bit of ground that we have custom put up by a different guy, but we do keep that field keep looking nice, and then we flood irrigated as we've talked about in previous podcasts. But yeah, we don't have any equipment other than tractors, backhoe, and a skid steer. Big change on Ladder Ranch here in the last.
Yeah, you guys like Wineglass compared to the stock run. You're pretty light on the machinery.
Yeah, and that.
But your guys where you are as well, where you guys have just brutal winters.
Right. And, when we go back to talk about animals on Ladder Ranch, rarely see a bad day. Well, that's also true unless it's after the 15th of November to the first week of May can be some bad days in a normal year.
Yeah, because you guys just get pummeled with snow and, just builds up and you got to just deal with it.
Yeah, when we let go of all of our hay equipment, we kept we had our tractors pretty well paid for. And so I was thinking, well, why would I want to get rid of my tractors if they're paid for? Because if I decide I do need that tractor, then I got to go back out and pay for it. And so I'm just going to keep it. Now we literally have one tractor that just sits around in case one goes down or we need to go plow snow somewhere. We can grab that tractor and go plow snow with it.
Yeah, it's needed where you are for sure.
Right. Not this year, but I think we plowed snow at my house one day. And
Yeah.
we were thinking, oh, this will be here the rest of the winter. And we shouldn't even have plowed. We should have just lived with it and not even plowed.
What's crazy was when we both experienced this, 2022, worst dry summer ever. And in that winter, the snowiest SOB ever. And then we just had the exact opposite of that, where we just had one of the best summers. I know you didn't, but then just a super dry open winter. It's really weird how that works.
Yeah, and where I live off my snowpack, my winter snowpack is my bread and butter, and that can tell me if what kind of summer I'm going to have at least to start off. Where your winter snow doesn't really do you any good, and you need it to hit about now, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Because you'll use snow as a water source occasionally, won't you?
that's my main water source for flood irrigating. And well, my sprinklers run off, so everything comes out of the river here, and then we will run it down ditches, and then that water will then, if we have a big snow, then it'll come down slowly as it heats up. And if you have a super warm April, May, June, something like that, then you can lose all your winter water basically that's stored up in the mountains. If it gets warm too fast, it'll all just go on by, and that's when we get to talking about Colorado River stuff, that's what goes into Lake Powell, Lake Mead. And if it warms up too fast for me, it's not a good thing because I can't access all the water. A lot of it just goes on by. And where, you guys are straight Ogallala Aquifer, right?
Yeah, yeah, definitely different. But will you use snow as like a cattle water drinking source or sheep?
In the winter, that's what our sheep primarily live off of. Sheep don't need water, liquefied water. They can live off of snow in the wintertime. And then usually if you have a good winter, that's what fills up your ponds and things like that too. So this year, I have one specific pasture on my forest permits that is really hard to use any other time than your first pasture because all the water are little beaver dams in the draws. And if you wait till July, they're gone. They've already evaporated, or other animals. We have large elk herds and stuff too. So everything's drinking out of those beaver ponds. And if you wait too late, you just can't use the pasture because the water isn't there.
Interesting. So you really need that snowpack for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah. And that pasture this year, I'm not sure I'll be able to use it all because the water didn't run. Often it'll come through the forest, then I have the private land at the bottom, and then it'll go right into the river on my private land, and it never ran.
So there's a pasture you can't use. How many acres is that?
It's probably 2,500 acres, national forest ground.
Yep, I just can't use it for a whole year. That's nice.
What are you thinking these farmers are going to do since they're putting in corn, soybeans? And tell me planting season for us Westerners, for you guys too.
Sure. So planting season just started. I think guys just got going today. A lot of the corn planters are rolling. A lot of soybeans went in last week. The conditions here are not good. We've had a half inch of precipitation since the first of the year. So guys are running the pivots ahead of the planter just to get the soil, just to get good seed to soil contact, just so the planter gets in the ground well. Fertilizer prices are high. Commodity prices are low. A lot of those my grain farmers are feeling the pinch right now, which I feel for you. I do feel for you guys. They are in a tough position.
Yeah, we can't expect them to continue to take losses and stay in business. It's just like any other business in the world. You have to have some profit to be able to stay in business.
Yeah, and I think I'm expecting a turnaround. And I make my living off cattle, so I can say this not biased, but I think change is coming in the grain complex. Inflation, just inflation. Corn should be $5 just following inflation, and with the price of oil increasing like that and everything else, I expect wheat, corn to increase in price sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we've talked about it, and I continually am shocked and can't understand why, as a non farmer, if there's cattle to be fed and room where you and I like to be on grass as many days as we can. We don't want them in front of a feed bunk if we can avoid it. Putting hay out to them, kicking whatever feed, DDG, anything in front of them if we can avoid it on our ranch operations. It seems to me there's opportunity for the grain guys right now to put in cover crops, talk to guys like you and me or whoever their local guy is and say, hey, I've got feed. I can grow you a lot of feed.
There's a lot of that happening in the Panhandle right now. I've taken a lot of phone calls with guys who are trying it out for the first time. In the Panhandle, they're going to be limited on water. They can't even look at grain production because they have like less than 30 days of water, which is not going to get you to grain fill. So I have been hearing a lot of that. And if you look at the price of cattle right now, that's where the margin is. And operations like us, we're very lucky to be diversified. And, we have the option to grow those cover crops. The last several years, that's just been a real money maker just because we get more cattle and more gains and bigger cattle, bigger checks.
Yeah. Well, where we talk about the Midwest, Iowa, Indiana, those states being the, in quotes, Garden of Eden. And those guys could also be doing that move. And yeah, it seems like a long way to bring a cow. But if the opportunity's there, somebody will jump on it.
Yeah, Joe Salatin actually wrote a series earlier this year on what that would look like. He went into the cost of the fencing, the cost of the cattle. Cows have just really left the proper corn belt over the last 20 years or so, and it's been price driven. I mean, there just has not been good money in the cow-calf sector until recently, so I get why they have left. But fundamentally, yeah, I think that to have that option, especially on the marginal ground, is a no-brainer.
Well, these opportunities with all the different GPS collars out there now, I think replaces a lot of those guys tore out their fence. And
Yeah,
that's why they don't want to get back into it, because they're like, man, there's just too much infrastructure to rebuild to get back into this business. And that's probably true on the building corrals to sort and ship and different things like that. But in terms of being able to rotate around, I think that those opportunities are diminishing, or those opportunities are getting better because of the new technologies coming out to control livestock and graze those areas that aren't farmable.
yeah, and not to mention it's skilled. It is skilled labor. It's not often paid as skilled labor, but it's no simple task. I had a friend I was talking to, grain farmer, and they were considering feeding operations so they could be the end users of their grain. And I told him, and they haven't had cattle in a few generations at least. And I'm like, man, that learning curve is so steep. It's going to take you 10 years to figure out all of the ways that you can screw up buying and selling cattle. I wasn't very optimistic, I guess.
I toured a place. I've toured it twice, actually. I was on the board of American Farmland Trust for, I think, 9 years. And one place we went to was south of West Lafayette, south of Purdue University in Indiana. And this guy had a really large farm, and he had a son that wanted to come home, but there was no room for him on the farming side of their operation to come back. And he said, well, I'm really not interested in farming. I want to run cows. And his dad said, I want you home. Let's figure this out. And they went and bought some of the most beautiful red Angus heifers I've ever seen.
What year was this?
This would have been probably in 2016 to 2020, somewhere in there.
Okay, so right before they doubled in value.
Yeah. And I mean, they nailed it. And they live so close to these huge centers of people. Like here out in the West where I'm at, I mean, I'm an hour plus drive to a Walmart, where he's 20 minutes from West Lafayette, a large university town. So lots of opportunity to sell that meat. And he got into the direct to consumer business and really looked like he was doing well, but he had figured out how to graze, and they were doing stuff grazing alfalfa, which is really what turned my mind onto it. I'm like, boy, if they can do it in the Midwest, why can't I do it out here? And they were going through and chopping it and stuff first. But anyways, this guy had figured out how to bring his son home by doing the thing that son wanted to do, and he had plenty of farm acres for his son to try out this new cow venture, which the dad said has been a home run and been a great opportunity for their ranch, just by opening up their minds and saying, how do we get a kid home that wants to be here?
Yeah, and what makes us very unique, Eamon, is our cattle spend a lot of time on farm ground. They spend most of the time on farm ground when you look at AUMs harvested, and so we're like the perfect example operation of flexing farm ground to run cattle, and you're just the exact opposite. It's one of the reasons that we're the perfect yin and yang for this podcast.
Yeah, for sure. We go back to the Garden of Eden. Those guys get rain. That's pretty fancy.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just think there's a lot of opportunity. I was watching a reel about a guy talking about how the government was paying $30 an acre to do cover crop seeding, and then they got all this cover crop grown, and then they had to burn it down because they couldn't figure out what to do with it, and they had trouble planting into it and all this other stuff, and maybe they let it get too tall. And like I said, I'm pretty derelict in terms of understanding how the farming side of it works, but why not put cows on that thing, get the free fertilizer that comes with them, and then those cows can go to, that's a kind of an operation you can go to finish, and you're not that far from to bring them back to go to a facility to finish.
Yeah, cows are the tool used to monetize cover crops.
Yeah. So,
well, should we put a bow on it? What should we hit on when we get together next week?
I think we keep talking about markets because this thing's changing every week, and we're down a little bit from the highs we've seen, but I think that there's still, conversations of how high this thing's going to go. The world's in a little bit of chaos right now with what's going on over at the Strait of Hormuz and Iran. So those markets, I'm sure, will be changing over the next week.
And we've definitely seen volatility.
Yeah, the jumps up and down. I don't think we're going to see that at the pump where they're going to change gas prices up and down depending on what day the strait's open.
No, probably not.
And then I'd love to hear you talk more about calculating grazing days and how you're figuring that out. And I'd be happy to visit a little bit about what I'm doing intensively grazing cattle in hay meadows.
We grew a milo field that we direct graze. We're direct grazing it now, and we can get into the data and how I calculate grazing days and profit per acre on those.
Yeah, great. And then fertilizer, I think we've all changed our plan or somewhat changed our plan, thinking of how much fertilizer costs, increases of 20 to 50%, and depending on what your mix is, and how that's affected individual operations.
Yeah, let's hit on that. I think that's good 3 for next week.
Yeah, that sounds good. Is there anything else you can think of?
I don't think so. It's always a pleasure, Eamon. Enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, sounds good. Well, keep on running on grass.
All right, later.